6 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Town of West Newbury Finance Committee. The first item on our agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment?
I was just going to ask the committee, electronic packets, paper packets, both. What do you, for the next couple of meetings, do you guys have a preference?
I prefer hard copy.
Okay.
I like to scribble and mark as I'm
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, that's easy.
I prefer electronic.
I can do both, but I won't do the electronic for you if you don't want it.
I mean,
No reason, yeah, okay.
whatever's easiest for you. If everyone's going paper, then I'll go paper too.
Okay, I'll plan to email it around and I'll plan to print paper copies for everyone unless they tell me they don't want
That'd be great.
Thank you. No public comment. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. Has everybody read and reviewed the minutes from our last meeting? Yep. What's the will of the committee?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Second. Is there any discussion?
Well, I have a discussion.
Go ahead.
Here. In a little email dialogue today, Chris had mentioned about, was Paul Savigny here? I put him in the, and I kind of remember.
He was sitting over there.
That's what I thought too. Okay, good.
Right, so I went back to Jim and I said, well, that's why I didn't see him because he was back there. I was just curious.
All right, good. So we're all good.
No, I didn't figure you missed it, Jim. That was on me.
No, I thought was that a mirage or what? Was that a dream? Okay, no, good, perfect.
Okay, great. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the minutes as presented?
Aye.
5 in favor, 0 opposed. Next item on our agenda is review, or I guess it's your section, Angus, if you have anything new that we need to cover. And then...
just the school with the vote on Friday night. What you have is updated to reflect the vote. It's a reduction of the town assessment for Pawtucket by about $200,000. So at the time that we went to print with this agenda, we didn't know. We assumed it would go down, but we didn't know that. So I wanted to say the agenda just in case there was some different outcome.
But still an override is.
No, we do not expect an override. There is no override proposed in West Newbury.
That was my question because it had been written in the paper that in balancing what you gave us that it was going to be a $200,000 reduction, but then also hearing that we were having a $300,000 override.
Yeah, where I didn't see that.
It was in Jen Solis's article.
Okay, she probably got that information from Pawtucket.
Okay,
we do not need an override.
Okay.
In some of their materials, it suggests that we do. I honestly don't know why they put that in their materials because they don't do our tax recount.
So that begs the question for me, since if 2 out of 3 vote for it, that's that approves it, forces it. Does that mean 1 out of 2 would force it?
Yeah, or unless our town meeting, didn't approve the budget.
Sure.
My understanding is if the budget is approved by 2 out of 3, that is the approved budget.
Right. Okay.
So if either of the towns do not pass an override, but one of them does, I think the others, they're just going to have to cut from their town budget. So
How are they going to mount a successful override campaign with such a short window?
It doesn't. It's never happened that I know of.
Well, I will tell you that starting last summer, Kentucky was having meetings, with the town saying they expected an override to be needed. So.
Okay.
I mean, when it fails, they'll go back. If they can't get to it quick, it goes to a 12th budget, right?
Right.
And usually they reel it back in and keep it under the override amount. That's what they've done in the past. I mean, I can't recall the last time a school override, other than the building project.
Well, it's a different mechanism. I mean, it's sort of like getting a mortgage versus, getting a home equity line credit to pay your electric bill forever.
It gets very dangerous if it fails in 2 towns. That's the problem.
Right. All right, so let's get into the budget. Town clerk.
All right, so I don't know if everyone's met Jim Blatchford. We hired Jim over the summer. He started right around Labor Day. He's doing a great job for us. That's the main dynamic in the clerk's budget is that when the FY22 budget was approved, it was the town clerk council budget. We didn't get Mike McCarron's notice of retirement until 2 days after town meeting. So we went through the budget process, understanding it was going to continue to be town clerk council. So what you have in front of you is just town clerk budget. I don't mean that in a disparaging way. But just
a town clerk.
So there was a change from, as you know, from FY21 to 22 to increase the hours for the assistant town clerk. That had been a 16-hour-a-week position. It was increased to a full-time position, which has been a huge plus. And
When I have.
yeah, well, of course, now they've been down short-staffed a couple of months because the assistant town clerk was recently promoted to be the council on aging director. But it's basically a level funded, level staff budget. Because the assistant town clerk position is vacant right now, we don't know what that wage is gonna be, so we're carrying a budgeted wage. If we come to, we've advertised it last week, we've got, I think, 5 resumes. Let's say over the course of the next 5 or 6 weeks, we hire someone and we end up hiring them at less than the budgeted wage, we could bring down that salary line.
Does anybody have an issue with taking this up with the next line item, which is the same office anyway, the elections?
The registrars.
Yeah, registrars. We'll talk about that too.
So the registrars, the cost difference there is driven by the increased number of elections next year versus in the current fiscal year. It also does carry an increase in the hourly rate for poll workers up to $15 an hour.
What's the will of the committee?
Motion to approve both.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you said the rate's increasing to $15 an hour from what? What was it previously?
Previously, it was just below minimum wage, well, what minimum wage will soon be. So I think it was dependent on board and clerk versus just a poll worker. So it was a split wage. I just evened it out to $15 an hour for everybody.
Are all the poll workers paid or are any of them volunteers?
I would prefer to pay them. If somebody wants to volunteer their time, I won't turn them away. But I found in the past experiences working with people, if they're willing to put in that amount of hour and do an important job, they should be compensated for it.
I agree. I think there's an attitude change between something you do for free and something you pay for. Anybody else have any other discussion on this matter? All those in favor of the budget as presented? 5 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that's for both. obviously.
That's for both. Yep.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Okay, so let's jump to
DPW.
DPW, which will be a longer discussion. So there's a couple of things going on in the operating budget. So this is page 28 of your packet. The main dynamic in terms of new expense is the proposed creation of a new position. So projects and programs management position. For those of you who've been on the committee for a while, we've been kind of following what goes on in town. Obviously, Wayne started with us about 2.5 years ago, a little less than that. Actually, no, it was almost, almost 3 years, now. Yeah, a little over 3 years. Yeah, but shortly after I started. I think his predecessor ran a really good department, but Wayne runs it in a couple of different levels. He's continued with the kind of operational excellence in terms of in the field and facilities and infrastructure, but also has really elevated the department in terms of purchasing, contracting, insurance, project management, regulatory compliance with things like stormwater. So there's a huge paperwork aspect of the Public Works Department, and Wayne and a 15-hour-a-week admin is all that we have in terms of the office staff. The admin's time is pretty much 100% devoted to putting through payroll, putting through the account payable warrants, and constituent service, answering phone calls and emails. So, we've really got to a point where the workload is really crushing and has been for some time. And then back in the summer when McCarron left, one of the many hats he wore for the town was Chief Procurement Officer. Wayne is the only person on staff who is fully certified as an MCPPO, Master Certified Public Purchasing Officer. That requires 9 full days of training over the course of 3 years, plus maintaining that certification over time. Even McCarron didn't actually have the full certification. He completed 6 of the 9 days. So Wayne is actually better credentialed as a purchasing officer than McCarron on paper. So back in September, we have to report to the Commonwealth who our purchasing officer is. So in September, I recommended to the board, obviously consulting with Wayne first, that we designate Wayne as the interim purchasing officer, which he is. We filed that paperwork with the state. That means his signature is binding on the town, in terms of awarded contracts and things. We did that on an interim basis, knowing that based on the present staffing, that is really not a sustainable situation. But we really didn't have a better option because he has the credentials. So basically, the proposed addition of the new position is not just to allow us to expand and take on new projects, which those of you who watch the board meetings or keep up with various committees know that we have new projects thrown at us, almost every week. But even to maintain the existing workload, it really takes, a number of hours and a level of effort that is really incompatible with any kind of work-life balance or any kind of family life at all. The select board are supportive of the position. They definitely recognize the need and recognize that the department has changed in terms of the level of service it provides and the level of diligence it applies towards some of the paperwork aspects of the department, as well as the project management aspects. We've got a lot of different, whether it's major things like the bridge or the upgrade of the fire alarm system at the Page School. We have a number of, trails, initiatives, planning things that all require site visits, managing contractors, working with the committees. I know Wayne can elaborate on that, but that's, you probably have questions on all sorts of aspects of the budget, but I wanted to lead with that because that's really the main driver as to why you see the bottom line increase. So we're carrying $75,000 in the budget for that. So you can see that accounts for, 3/4 of the proposed increase in the overall budget bottom line. Two other things I didn't mention on the projects programs. One is the green communities. This is something that's starting in my first month on the job. Rick Parker, who at that point was not on the select board, he was and continues to be on the Energy Advisory Committee, approached me with concerns he had, having been the town's kind of dedicated volunteer for, at that point, many years, keeping the town in compliance with the Green Communities Act. There's significant reporting associated with being a green community. We literally have to report to the Commonwealth every gallon of gas we purchase, every unit of energy we purchase, every unit of energy generated by every solar array in town. Those all have to be reported to the Commonwealth both monthly and annually. The annual report is dozens of hours of work. There is nobody on staff whose job it is to do that. So Rick approached me early in my tenure. The way it works in practice with the green communities, I help, Wayne helps, Annie helps. We have a number of people who and then each department provides their department's gas bills, but it's, Rick continues to do a lot of that work, and he continues to have concerns just about the long-term sustainability. This is the town's obligation. And while it's great to have volunteers who step up and do work, we're vulnerable because now obviously he's not only on the select board, he's the chair, he's also on multiple other committees. So it's a real bandwidth issue. More recently, the town opted into the MVP program. That's a municipal vulnerability preparedness program. That's another program that requires, there's grants, there's certifications. And one thing the town opted into just in the last few months is to set a baseline inventory of greenhouse gas emissions townwide. That was a, grant funded, consultant supported effort to build out that baseline. That is going to become an annual reporting requirement that falls on this town. We have no staff to do that. So basically, there's tons of need. I could go on and on, but I think that's, I don't know, Wayne, did I miss anything?
Yeah, pretty much covered it. Just obviously stormwater program, stormwater management, we've asked for assistance with that, helping with the new requirements that are coming in. We also talked about, maybe using the person for help review of public and private O&M reports and review, at least coordinated through the other. I mean, we don't have people putting, we're all loosey-goosey and trying to chase after each other. It's nice to give somebody ownership, and that's what we're trying to give one person ownership of programs instead of 5 people being the grant administrator for a grant. It doesn't work when 5 people manage a grant. And that's, Angus does some, he gives some to me, I give it back to him, and then we get another third person involved. It's not very efficient, and that's how mistakes happen.
Yeah, and on the MS4 stormwater, as a regulated entity holding a permit from the EPA, every development that's approved in town that disturbs more than an acre is subject to the stormwater bylaw. In addition to the additional permitting requirements, Wayne's referencing the O&M plans, there are requirements for that permit entity. So let's take Drake's Landing as a great example. They are a permit holder by the town. Condition of that permit is they have to do an annual operation and management. Or they have to do an O&M plan that's approved at the time of permitting. We have to ensure on an annual basis that they are implementing their O&M plan for their stormwater infrastructure, that they're cleaning out their detention basins, that they're cleaning out the silt from the catch basins, whatever it is that's in the O&M plan. So, that's a continuing annual function that these permits just have a lot of things like that take time and that weren't part of the job 5 or 10 years ago.
Obviously, every grant, like you said, every grant that we've taken on, the bookkeeping and the accountability for every grant report writing, the monthly reports, the quarterly reports. Yes, I could say it takes an hour and a half to do the Middle Street one. It also takes an hour and a half to do another one. It takes an hour and a half to do another one. So if you only look at one at a time, who can't do one grant? To do 10 grants takes a lot of your time up when you're trying to balance between all that. And for TPW, our main goal is operations. So if there's a tree on a house or a grant on my desk, guess what goes first? The tree on the house. That's going to win every single time. And if it means the grant's due at 5 and it doesn't go in for a day and a half later, it goes in a day and a half later. And we keep our fingers crossed when we get yelled at. The person with the house, with the tree on the house, doesn't give much about that grant that's on my desk right now. That's really a challenge for me, is trying to pull away from that and prioritize the operation stuff. So it's nice to have a person who's not responsible to put out the fire. Your fire is in front of you, the paperwork in front of you, get the grant in. That's your fire. And don't worry about what's going on out in the world out there. So that's the important.
Make a motion to approve the DPW budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion time.
I was curious about one thing, the electricity. My electric rates have gone sky high. I'm wondering why the budget for the electricity is the same as it was before.
I think we're making it by, the projections showed us that.
Yeah, year to date, we're tracking a little behind the budget. We do have an offset with the solar gauge, so that does help our electric bill.
Which isn't fixed though, that's what's things you can't count on it being exactly.
Right,
It varies
every month is different.
based on how much sun we get.
Right.
So I always feel that it's like a gift, if we get a good amount, it's a bonus, right? But I think we're in line right now, currently.
Okay.
We don't have a shortfall of electricity.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, of course. Chris, do you have anything you'd like to ask?
Insignificant, I guess, but it says the $75,000 plus the benefits are excluded. What's the total value of the benefits and where does that dovetail?
So in the two weeks ago, we talked about the health insurance budgeting, and you may remember that I talked about how we budget that. We do carry a contingent amount for a new family plan, so that if an employee began on July 1st and opted into the family plan, we have that covered in the health insurance budget. And we carried for one new employee with this one in mind. So that's about $22,000. If someone comes in, they're on a spouse's plan or they're on an individual plan, that's like $12,000 or $13,000 is the difference between the individual and family for the town share. But that is already carried in the budget. And then on the retirement, that doesn't show up for another year. Basically, the Essex Regional assessment is based on the most recent completed calendar year audited payroll. So our FY 23 assessment is based on our calendar year 2021 payroll. So if we hire a position and they work for half of calendar year 2022, that's going to show up in our FY 24, and then it's not going to fully show up till our FY 25. So there's about a year and a half lag time. That does amount to almost 30% of the gross wages. It is a significant amount, the retirement.
So $75,000 position basically costs the town about 125,000.
Yeah, it depends on health insurance, but I think, let me see, that's, I think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
You guys, Jim or Nathan, do you have any? Go ahead, Jim.
I'm writing down some notes for the question. Go ahead, Nate.
All right, one of the things I was curious about is street paving. I'm just curious why it's being reduced and why only 15 to 25,000 was spent in fiscal year 20 and 21. I just like you to speak upon that, because I know that there are people who I've spoken to that are just generally frustrated about the roads in some places. Not that our roads are as bad as other towns, but I also know that you have a list of high priority streets as well, and so I know that's on your radar. So I'm just curious why that's getting underspent.
So that line isn't really made for, it's the punch list paving, it's on top of the chapter 90 projects. So
Okay.
we have the chapter 90 money, which is 500, we consider $500,000, $2 something a year. And that's what we use to pave the roads. What Gary had did in the past was he used that money to offset the smaller parts of the paving, the street sweeping, the milling, the burn work. Now I wrote a contract to cover all that into the bid, because I think I get a better deal by setting up, I want all these 9 things done by one vendor. So I put it in the chapter 90, which is a lot of paperwork, it's a pain, a big pain, but in the long run, one contract, everything done under one contract, instead of calling a street sweeper to come in, calling a burn guy to come in after the fact. So we are using more chapter 90 money and less paving money. That paving money you're talking about, we use for spot repairs when we have a break somewhere, road deterioration. We haven't been able to use it as much because our roads are actually in really good shape as long as we keep paving on a routine schedule, which we got another round to do this fall. So would I like to have $300,000 in that line and go rogue and do some other streets? Absolutely, but we can only handle so much internally to manage it anyhow. So even if you said here's $1 million, I'd have a hard time spending it with the available staff we have at the time.
All right, thank you.
Actually, there is one other thing. If you can speak to there was a balance in an article that was approved, I think in like 2016, that Wayne's been working with Stephanie to draw down that balance.
No sunset clause on it?
There was no sunset.
Wow.
This was back before you did sunset clauses, so we were working that.
It was like $20,000+ we spent off that, I think.
Yeah.
Or more. So I was trying to draw that down, we found that, and it's old, so we used that to also something that we appreciate.
So talk about the value of the paving contract that we just did.
So it came in okay, we estimated the contract at $87, and it came in at $67. Thank God, because our roads are easy to pave. But that might change.
Yes. What was the total value of the contract?
5 something.
Yeah. Yeah.
5.
So there was, if you go back a few years, there was basically a missed year on the paving rotation. And that was, that basically was a problem that started the day before I set foot here, because there had been a contract in place with a paver that expired on June 30th of 2018. I started July 2nd. And when I started, I remember Gary Bill expressed great frustration because they had a contract. He'd been working with, the procurement to extend it and to do a simple contract extension. It never got done. The contract expired. It had to be rebid. Gary retired. Wayne was hired. So basically we missed an entire season of paving because a contract was not extended. So if people have noticed in the last 4 years, a gap, there was a 1-year gap. So.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I have a couple questions. Maybe it's a 2-part question. One of them is I read the job description, which is quite detailed, that you provided, and I guess my question is do you think you can actually hire somebody with that skill set and that responsibility for $75,000? And then maybe the second part of that is, in your mind, Wayne, is there like a cost benefit to actually hiring somebody versus trying to maybe buy or purchase a consultancy that could do a similar thing, you know, that.
I love consultants because if they call them sick, I don't care. You know, they get hurt on the job, they send us another one.
Yeah.
So the consultant was the first thing you look at. I hate to say it, it's true. If the consultant doesn't, they give us a send us another one, they get paid to do it. Obviously, that would be the best option, but this job is gonna be so unique. That's kind of tough to find a consultant that can do every one of these. Angus and I originally were talking, well, it sounds like an engineer, but really it isn't an engineer. I mean, it's great if you have some engineering, but it's a grant administrator. It's a program, it's a program manager, it's a project manager. So somebody with some of that skill, a little bit of each of that skill, and they could broaden themselves on that, it'd be a good project manager. I think it will help us out. And then plus we want to expand their job on like helping with chapter 90 paving, you know, understanding the program, you know, the backside of it, the paperwork side of it. I'm not asking them to go out and pave the road with us, but it'd be nice if someone could understand how the grant, how MassDOT works. Safe routes to school, if we go with that direction, up at the paid school, that's a program that's all in that my head's been trying to figure out how we did it at my last job. I was losing 6 hours a week just trying to manage that. It was a pain. So programs like that, if we're not even starting to get ourselves into the safe routes to school yet, deep yet, that's gonna be a program to manage. Could an engineer do that? Absolutely. Do I need to pay an engineer to do it? No, we have an engineer. I could watch over somebody and make sure they, but we really need somebody to push paper and really follow up on data, forms, deadlines, accountability. It's tough to be accountability. I'm doing this for that and turn it off and go to the next thing. Somebody to really spend the time on it.
One other, actually, that made me think of, one of the really active dialogues that's going on a couple of years now, but really the last couple of months, and you'll hear more about this in 2 weeks when we have the water department here, is I think, you know, everyone knows there's an enormous capital backlog in terms of main replacements. It's a very active discussion between my department and the water department. There is more money available. There's SRF, you know, state revolving funds, monies available that would be eligible for water main replacements. Those are incredibly complex, incredibly time intensive. Last year, my office or the town collectively managed nearly 30 grants over the course of the year. So, you know, some people in town have thought like, oh, we're not about applying for grants. No, the reason I try to pump the brakes is because we are doing so many grants. It is actually irresponsible, in my opinion, to continue to pursue grants when your very short list of people doing the work are saying, we have no bandwidth. We are working insane hours. And yet the political culture is more grants, more grants. So the SRF alone is a huge learning curve. It's a, you know, there's real money there. So it's well worth the effort, but right now we have nobody. The water department has no business manager. There is nobody who's going to be applying for and administering grants. And so, you know, that's a continuing conversation about what is the division of labor, what's the water department's expectation of the front office, because we're at the breaking point. We have been for the whole time I've been here in terms of workload and hours. So if we're going to be able to increase our level of service to the water department to go after some of these monies, we need the bandwidth. And that's not something we can do right now.
Nathan?
So just to be clear, this person is not just grant administrator towards the DPW, it's across multiple departments. In addition to DPW specific duties related to storm management, but hopefully grant management for many departments.
That's right.
It's
purchasing as well.
It sits there, somebody could oversee the operation, because it's something Angus and I could do. We could do that if we had nothing else.
Right, but you have other
So
jobs.
one of us
your
would
job.
have to oversee this.
Right, but the purchasing
I
too.
got it now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've really increased our professionalism on purchasing, on RFPs, on bids, on contracts, on insurance. Those were some things that were not happening when we began here 3.5 years ago.
What does the terminology SRF mean?
State revolving funds.
Okay.
And you can get sometimes low interest or even no interest long-term borrowing.
Our practice of snow and ice budgeting continues, and I've bored you all to death with my feelings about that for some time now, but I hope that there'll come a day where we budget adequately.
Did the materials resonate at all?
I feel like it's sanctioned irresponsibility. I think like we're hoping that there'll be an emergency and we'll get money back. You know, it would be as if your mom said, you know, Angus, it's fine, you can smoke if you want. You're like, it's still bad for you. You know, it's not responsible budget. And I don't know if it's because I paid too much attention in a class when I was in college or not. It doesn't sit right with me. We could just do a revolving average, and I just think it's a better way to do it. But it's not a hill I'm gonna die on right now. I just don't particularly care for the practice. Does anybody have anything else? We've got a motion, we've got a second on the budget. We've had discussion. All those in favor of the budget is presented. 5-0. Thank you. We've got to do articles.
So we got a handful of articles that are, so this page 44 of your packet is kind of the index. So I want to start by saying that while each of these, there's a placeholder on the warrant, the select board has not taken their positions on these. And so, you know, I'm sure assuming you guys are comfortable taking a position before the select board does, I'm sure they're going to listen to what you have to say. They wouldn't be on here if the select board was that's against them. But I think this first one in particular, facility improvements, you know, we discussed it at last night's meeting. I described it as kind of an a la carte. There's some things in there that may fly. There's some things that may not fly. And so what's going to go to town meeting is what, you know, what the select board keep on there. So I think if, you know, hopefully there's enough in here for you to understand what's proposed. And you can.
Does anyone have an objection to going over this before the board of selectmen?
It's been a regular practice of ours. for
Okay,
years, so I think
I
it's-
figured I'd ask.
I don't know if it's stepping on toes or not, I don't know.
You know,
It's just kind of the way they roll.
You know, they put it on the warrant, but it always kind of runs in parallel with this committee because they closed the warrant, February 14th, and your first meeting is 2 weeks later. When they, you know, I think they wouldn't, well, I know they wouldn't put something on the warrant if they thought it was a non-starter. But I'm always clear with them, and putting it on the warrant, that is not their endorsement of it. You know, they can take the time that they need to take to go through their deliberation. So I think if, you know, let's say you guys recommended something and they didn't, speculate. But,
Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's read the article.
Yep.
Let's, we've got a motion, we'll get a second, we'll have discussion, we'll vote up and down.
Can you say what page this?
yeah, so the summary memos on page 44, and then that follows, there's a draft, kind of a memo with what's essentially a, yeah, and then the first one, number 23 begins on page 53.
Okay, great.
So this is, you know, similar in format to what you've seen in prior years, with basically a single article looking to batch a number of smaller improvements, none of which individually meet the capital threshold. So while it is one article, it is comprised of what I think 7 different, 6 or 7 different.
Well, I mean, number 2, number 3 would, number 5 would. Right? That's 3 of the 7 that would individually.
It's,
Is there
Just
20,000?
to this point.
yeah, no, I know. If there's a capital improvement committee waiting on any of these over $10,000.
No idea.
Is 20,000 is their threshold.
Right.
Have they weighed in on any of the over 20,000?
And are they batched in the same manner for CIC, or are they grouped?
I think I pulled out the, they under $20,000 ones, so they didn't know you see it.
The under.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is this gonna move forward as one article at town meeting, or is this gonna end up as the 3 that individually qualify as individual
So
town projects and then a 4th with?
I don't I don't know that I agree with that. I think that the select board hearing room, I don't see that as a capital item.
I mean, it's not individually, but if we're doing a whole renovation, I mean, I certainly think the roof is, the garage roof and the facilities workstation relocation.
Let's get a motion and second to talk about this.
Make a motion to approve unnamed article facilities improvement.
Is there a second? Is there a discussion?
I have a question about this new
Go ahead.
reception desk. Who's gonna staff that?
That is in process.
I mean, it's another $120,000 a year?
No, an existing person and or volunteers.
I don't know that we're gonna hear volunteers, because if volunteers are not doing polling, because everyone, as our clerk said tonight, he wants all the polling people to be paid, then are we really gonna get a volunteer in here full-time or enough coverage to have that position manned? It sounds like it's gonna be a staff person.
Well, if it is, it's an existing staff person.
Okay.
What's the need? Security?
No, it's more, it's actually, there's a number of needs we're looking to fill. One is that we have a council on aging that is really significantly expanded the amount of programming they're offering in the last 2 months. The new director has really taken the reins and taken that department in a much more entrepreneurial direction in terms of like restarting the meals, a lot more programming. And I'm sure you've seen it, if you got the newsletter, you see that it's a very evident increase in level of service. Right now, that's a one-person department, plus the Meals on Wheels, who she's terrific. She does great work, but there's no backup. There's no one to, so if the COA director has a meeting out of the office is closed. So what I'm proposing in the budget is to relocate an existing half-time position out of the select board office down to partly support the COA. And for some number of years, actually going back to before I started, the board that hired me, one of the priorities they had identified was wayfinding in this building. People come in, they don't know where to go. We have different offices with different hours of operation. Someone might be out in the field, let's say the conservation agent, the health agent's out in the field. Someone gets here, they trudge up 2 flights of stairs, see the office is closed, they get frustrated. Having someone in the front office who could help direct people, who would know when the offices were staffed, not staffed, who was in, who was out, I think would be a significant customer service boost. In terms of the volunteer idea, it's actually, I mean, it says volunteer, we're really thinking senior tax workers.
That's not been expanded.
That's being significantly expanded, really because of the efforts of the new director. She's being much more proactive about engaging and managing that. Part of why the senior tax work-off program has been somewhat underutilized is it's the management impact of someone taking on the responsibility to oversee basically a part-time volunteer. And so with the COA director, who's much more dynamic, I shouldn't say that, much more proactive about that, we fully expect to have a lot more people engaged in the program. Also with COVID, that had a huge chilling effect on the senior tax program. So, we feel you could definitely get 20 hours a week of coverage just for the senior tax work off.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Kind of,
How does this article work at town meeting? You've got 7 components. If people want to,
you can make an amendment.
right, but you could have multiple amendments.
Could have multiple amendments.
It's not like the school budget where each line item you either yes or no and then vote the whole budget.
Well, I mean, we don't get the luxury of taking things out of the line item of the school budget. We just get the school.
Well, you can question, I guess you can, the school budget town, yeah. Couldn't it get messy, I guess is my question.
It could.
I mean, if I go back a couple of years, this type of article was pretty routine.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I understand why many of these things are not in the budget. It makes sense that they're this year and they're not budgetary things. But it seems like some of them should be pulled out as individual articles because of their costs. It's a large amount individually. And then there are 7 things here that oftentimes what I hear what you're saying, they're batched together with common like things. These seem very different.
They are.
And
True.
I'm uncomfortable with this article
Okay.
based on the way it's written. And based on the way this is batched. So I have lots of questions because this is like 7 articles to me. Like I go down my list here, roof replacement. I wrote, okay, DPW facilities workstation, okay. Annex sanitary line repair, okay, those all make sense to me. I would approve those individually. I know that based on past experience. But the select board hearing room, I look at it and I say, okay, the rewiring makes sense. I know what we've been through the last several years. Cabinet makes sense. Chairs, I haven't had a problem sitting in these chairs. I've sat in those chairs too.
Not those chairs.
I've sat in those chairs too.
Yeah.
And they're not that bad. I mean, I've sat in worse. I've sat in worse chairs in other places. I don't know. Anyway,
At the moment, I'm fine.
but I don't know. I'm
But I think
I'm
that's
just
gonna be the
frustrated.
problem at town meeting by batching.
yeah.
So
I
that
agree.
diverse items, but it-
And then I have lots of questions about the AD thing too. It says, quote, many can be done at a fraction of the cost. Well, how many? Which ones exactly? There's like this blue color coding, but I'm sure what I'm curious really about is it's a $53,000 cost that we're alleging can be, or how much of the $53,000 cost that we have that's ADA stuff are we saying that can be addressed for $10,000? What either dollar figure or percentage of it? And if you could explain what the color coding mean, and then there's something about on page 61 of our packet, something about grant funds, and I'm not sure what that's referring to, or if those are something we have, or you know, whatever that is. So
Yeah.
I have a whole slew of questions.
Okay, so I think, just to start, I think that if, I'm getting a sense that if this is gonna be an issue here, this is gonna be an issue at town meeting. So, and I'm glad Rick's here, because I think that we could probably disaggregate this into multiple articles without anyone crying foul procedurally, since it was all before the board at the time they closed the warrant. There's no intent to cause confusion, so I think, that's a point well taken. So you want to just take the discussion for each of them as if they're separate articles?
Well, we could vote on them separately. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but we'll have to, I guess, either vote through on a no and then start over, or what do we,
I mean,
because we have.
I mean, the select board had a somewhat similar discussion last night in terms of, you know.
We didn't necessarily, we didn't see the necessity in a couple of items, and other items we thought were
Right.
fairly justified.
Yeah, so I guess, let me just start with the ADA. So I threw in that one page, I had more initially, and I pulled some out because I didn't want to lard up the packet with distractions. Basically, we got an ADA compliance grant about, geez, I lose track of time, if it was 1 year, 18 months. Anyhow, we got about, I think, 10 grand from the Mass Office of Disability. We had a comprehensive audit of all of the town facilities. It was very, very good. I think very good initiative. And it came up with a punch list. We got a pretty clean bill of health, but we did get a punch list that they estimated about 53,000. I'll let Wayne speak to, you know, we have some very, you know, some real talent on staff, in particular our buildings and grounds supervisor, Brian Richard, is a master carpenter. He's very, very good at what he does. We think we can do a lot of what they are calling out for a fraction of the cost if we do it in-house. We just don't know when. It's a matter of when he has time to do X, Y, and Z. So we basically want to make a good faith effort toward implementing the recommendations. The way ADA compliance works, just because we get this, you know, list, there's no expectation that gets done in year one. You need to be making a good faith effort. So that could happen over the course of a couple of years.
my question though, I'm sorry to interrupt you. My question really relates to the idea with this specifically is, of the $53,000, we're putting $10,000 toward this theoretically.
Mhm.
How much of this list, or which items on this list, are we getting $10,000 worth for $10,000? Are we getting $40,000 for 10,000? That's what I'm looking for
I clarification.
don't
know, I have to really, I mean, it's probably 80 hours of engineering to sit down, price everything out, and do the work orders associated with each one. I have not at the time, I looked at the report, but I have not sat for 2 weeks to figure out. The door knobs and special orders, you have to have a friction on them, on certain door knobs, some don't. You have to, and I'm very particular, this will be done to the letter, but I wanted to make sure I got the article in now. Good afternoon. I have not engineered it. We won't do it until I figure out each step each product and how far we're gonna go. We're gonna go for the hanging fruit, the easy stuff, lowering boxes. That is too high. The ADA that's out the hall here is too high. Those things are little money. Doorknobs expensive as hardware, but little easy things to do.
Sure.
We're gonna go after with them the easiest things to do. So if somebody does report us and say they're out of compliance, we could show them we put a good faith offer in to start addressing the letter. So my $10,000 was a random number. I don't like this. And I said, I think we could get started. We could get going. And Sam and I talked about stuff that we think we could do easy and improve, but we wanted to get something started. I have not engineered this out yet. I've priced it out. Project managed this at all. It's overwhelming that if you looked at the report, the budget was this big, with 8 buildings in town, broken up, just to review all that stuff, why it took me a week just to go to the binder. Not even to try to work to do next, so we have to do it. I haven't done it yet.
And he mentioned Sam Jocelyn is our
Yep.
building inspector at ADA, and Wayne's our deputy ADA coordinator.
So Nathan, I really haven't put a lot of thought into what I get for the $10,000. I hope a lot.
Yeah, and
I hope in 25% of it, or more, we can check off the list.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're kind of floating here. I mean, we have a motion and a second on everything. I mean, we can vote that down and then take everything up individually if you want to do that, or whatever, however you guys would like to proceed. If you don't.
How about, do you want to do it kind of like town meeting where someone put a hold on any of the 7 and take it out of and then take a motion on whatever's not held and then go back to those?
Yeah, that's fine. You guys want to remove individually, whatever you want to remove and take up.
So hold if we want to remove something.
Yes.
Okay.
Doing that on all 7, we're gonna do it each individually.
We're gonna, so we have a box filled up with these things. We're gonna take things out individually that we don't want to.
We're gonna do one at a time as we discuss them, like this one is.
And we're gonna, whatever's left in the box, we're gonna review collectively, and then we'll take whatever was removed individually.
And I have confirmed, I think Wayne said this, but items 2 and 3 on the list were submitted to capital improvement committee and our sweater.
What do you want to take out?
You want to- So we're gonna read down the list, and if someone says hold, then we,
Well, I guess you can
Oh, wait, let's
just say, I would like to remove this from collective, consideration, and then we'll just take it up individually.
I want to remove 5, 6, and 7.
We'll just say what those are, so that. we can-
Select board hearing room, planning department to 2nd floor hearing room. I just wanted to discuss that more. I'm not saying for or against, and then the front office, the vestibule.
Okay, so of the remaining pieces of this, does anybody else wish to remove any of those things for individual discussion?
I do not, I just see the confusion at town meeting if people start, that's my
Wait,
concern.
I mean, this could be completely repackaged by the time we vote.
Okay.
I mean, and that's possible.
I think 1, 2, 3, and 4 are no brainers, so to speak, that would pass easily at town meeting.
I
based on
agree
past experience as
personally,
well.
yeah.
So on 1, 2, 3, and 4, we have a motion and a second. What is the will of the committee?
Make a motion to approve facilities improvement articles, specifically items 1 through 4.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Jim?
No, I was just, I'm
Did you say
feverishly
second?
taking
Okay.
notes because
All right,
everything's moving
okay.
fast. Okay.
All those in favor of approval on this? 5, in opposition. Okay, let's go over the individual ones.
Specifically 1 to 4, got it, okay.
So I mean, this number 5 is high now, because we've been hearing response from people, the dollar amount, they go modifying the hearing, select board hearing, correct? So we talked about the table, or keeping the table, so that's a huge.
So is that removing the select board? I don't even know how to say that word. Dais?
Dais,
I don't know.
which I didn't know what it was, it took me like 4
I know what they are, I just don't know how to say it.
That one, they would love, the select board would love to keep the table, because we put a lot of money to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where is this table going otherwise, because that seems.
It's been strongly supported that it stays here.
Okay, so is that
I would take that
reducing
off.
this by $9,000?
I would take that off the article.
I mean, Rick, is that what you heard about?
Yeah, I think so. I think there was consensus.
That's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and then on the rewiring and the custom cabinet, I have reached out to the cable advisory committee. I think those are both, that's, I think what, $7,400.
They've got a lot of money.
That
They do.
is fully eligible for use of the PEG funds. I haven't gotten a response yet, but I will follow up until I do. I do think there's a good chance that 7,400 could be funded through the PEG funds.
Good.
So it leaves us just with the chairs, pretty much, and, you know, just leaves us with the chairs.
Yeah. That's,
On those cables, I kind of remember a discussion a while back where we had this money from Comcast or somebody.
that's
That's the
the
cable, yeah,
that's
the cable.
Yeah.
All right, so, what's the motion? You're looking for a certain amount of money, which we're gonna figure out what it is, for chairs. Right.
So are the other things still going to happen, but just be through the
not the
cable
select
advisory?
board table.
The other two
Yeah, the
things,
wire-
rewiring and cabinet through cable advisory committee.
Yeah, I think we'll get that.
So make a motion to approve the select board hearing room improvements of rewiring and custom cabinet and closet with cable advisory committee money as funding. That's the motion.
Well, that doesn't need a town meeting. vote.
That does, okay, good,
Yeah.
then they can just authorize it.
Yeah,
Awesome, then we don't even do that. So I'll remove my motion.
Chairs.
So make a motion to approve select board hearing room improvement. 35 new chairs, we'll put the cost, we'll put it at $8,000.
Is there a second?
I'll second, so we can have discussion. Okay. Just a curious question, this is another issue. We're getting rid of a middle school and a high school loaded with furniture.
That's
It's gotta be 35 chairs.
That's not our circus, though.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying, so I would not go for this
Yeah.
as a taxpayer though.
Right.
Based on that, it's,
I mean, what do you think, man? I think
I
it's,
think
It's a matter of
our
whose
meeting
property
room,
it is.
We do our important business, it should be the best looking room in the building, I have to say this, place doesn't look like we do important things. We do important things in this building every week, 3 times a week, we make important things. The room should reflect the importance that we're doing, I'm not asking you to case it in gold or anything like that, but we got these chairs here that are not comfortable after an hour. I'll tell you that for sure, after an hour, these things, terrible. It kills my back, it kills everybody's back, we see we have a burning party when we send these out.
I mean, the purpose of these chairs is so that they can get into a small space. I've seen other places that have the same chairs, but instead of being cloth,
Yeah.
they are plastic,
Yes.
which is probably less comfortable,
But these are gone now,
but
they're starting to lose their life.
right,
so-
but my point is that those deteriorate more and more quickly, whereas the plastic ones are good forever.
Yes, but we have.
And they look better.
But we have 3 or 4 hour meetings here. We
True.
organize that. This is not a 45-minute meeting location. It is what it is. And we found that desk downstairs, that one the COA gave us. I mean, what do we, if somebody's individual office, they wanna go around and collect things out of the dumpster, feel free. But I'm gonna pull it out of your office if I see it. This is the board of selectmen room. You should be comfortable. We're doing important stuff. It's reflection of a newbie coming into the town hall, and this is town offices, and this is what we do. Sit down, get comfortable, you're gonna be here for a while. That's all, these chairs are like, we probably got these from somebody. I mean, we do that a lot. We go around and collect some.
Well, I doubt that, because several years ago, the COA asked for more funding for new chairs, and we approved it unanimously, so I doubt that.
All right, anyway, let's not get
Really?
crazy. Any other discussion? That's not. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of supporting the purchase of the chairs for the year and no? No. Okay, 4 in favor, 1 opposed.
Okay. Make a motion to approve facilities improvement article part 6, planning department. We haven't discussed this one much.
I'll second that.
Sorry.
Discussion.
I think part of, and I think this got cleared up on our last part, part of my curiosity related to that one, the reason for the whole was my idea was going to be that this table would then in theory go upstairs, and because it should be put to use, it should not be disposed of, so to speak. that, because if we were replacing it, that was part of my reason for the hold.
Why would we do this if we're upgrading this room? Why couldn't they just work down here?
Well,
They may have
I think
conflicts.
it makes sense to have two meeting rooms, so you have two meetings at once.
Right.
The problem is we have a somewhat semi-hearing room with miscellaneous stuff in there now with mixed match tables and some mixed match chairs. And then we have a planning department that we have two staff members that are stuck in the corner in a big room. And they can't really spread out because we have this big table in this room for a once a month meeting or twice a month meeting. So the planning department wanted to move their hearings twice a month, whereas into the hearing room upstairs and give Leah and the part-timer some room to move, open up, have places to pull up the drawing, leave the drawings open for you.
Do they benefit from, I don't know what nights they meet, I don't know if they conflict with other meetings, I don't know if they benefit from being upstairs as opposed to being down here because, oh, we run down the hall and grab something. I don't know the answer to that, so.
They definitely benefit from having that, they meet on Tuesdays, every
Okay.
other Tuesday, or I think it's the second or fourth, twice a month. But I know proximity to their files and, all the role plans is definitely helpful to them. So I know they want to continue to have their meetings upstairs.
So it sounds like this ultimately is an improvement of the second floor hearing room and a decluttering of the planning office. That's what it's really like, I guess.
Any other discussion?
We do, by the way, have planning on next week's agenda. So while Wayne is carrying the flag, this initiated there. So if you're comfortable acting tonight, that's great. But if you want to hear from.
There's extra meeting chairs, maybe they could be brought down here. Just joking.
Any other discussion on this? Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of supporting this portion of it? Opposed, one. I'm
You're
opposed.
opposed?
All right, and last but not least, part 7, make a motion to approve facility improvement article, part 7, the town office's proposed reception area.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
I think this needs to be fleshed out more. It seems to be buried. There's a lot of pressure on your office, Angus, on a regular basis where you state where a lot of moving parts, we don't know who's gonna be doing what, and a lot of everyone's overworked, and suddenly we're adding more work by putting someone in the station. We're removing them, we're taking them away from everybody. I understand that there's a public service to be gained from here, but I don't think they're serving as a gatekeeper per se. There are people who are gonna fly right by this person and march right up the stairs. As I walked in tonight, I took a look at this area and thought to myself, I imagined it there, right? And it's not gonna stop anyone from just walking right up the stairs.
No, it's not intended to stop anyone.
I'm not sure a lot of people will notice it on their first, second, even third time walking in, they're gonna go right up the stairs.
Yeah, part of what is driving, and I won't say need, because if it doesn't go, part of what's driving the space issues is, right now, the finance department has an unstaffed position. So to add a body with the current office layout that we have, right now, we have the select board meeting room, the select board kind of office has a single 22-hour-a-week employee in there. It's a large room. That is valuable space. I need that. So I need to reorganize between my office, finance, town clerk, and a half-time select board employee. There needs to be a new workstation that fits. And so that's kind of pushes things around. I don't disagree that it needs more thought. It's something I've been thinking about for 6 months and still haven't had time to really flesh out. But similar to what Wayne said with the ADA, this is one of the challenges of getting appropriations basically once a year with annual town meeting. It's like if you miss this opportunity, it's like you missed 6 months to a year. And we do know adding a body is going to create a space constraint in the finance town manager office. So if we put 2 people in the select board office, that's to me like that's not a great situation because without a
The other concern I have is what duties it's going to take away them from them. I assume the person you're saying moving is Annie.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of what Annie does, and we assume she can do many of those things from a position down here.
Yeah.
But then it's also, you know, I suspect that this person would become like the phone calls in would become directed through this person too. Is that fair?
No, because it's not a full-time, it's
Okay.
not full-time staffed. So that's one of the.
I mean, that's what it says, part of what it says in here in the description. It's just that they're gonna be answering phone calls.
They can when they're here, so we could treat, they'll have a phone, so Annie would still be able to answer her phone would still be there, so it's not like she's moving her desk and sitting up there half the time answering her phone.
But who would be,
The main switchboard is the town clerk's office and would continue to be because that's
Okay.
staffed, full-time hours. But basically, I'm looking to move some of the licensing responsibilities out of this position into the clerk's office. And part of what's driving the need for additional staffing is Park and Rec. Up until 2 years ago, that was all basically done entirely outside this building. And I don't want to go too far with that because that's not for a week from now. But I cannot overstate the time impact of Park and Rec and field use requests on this town. And that's affected me personally. That's affected Annie tremendously to the point where there were work weeks this summer where she spent her entire work week doing field use requests. That is all time she doesn't have to support me and the work I need, and it's created a huge time crunch. So, Park and Rec has become, there is nobody on staff with any stated responsibility for Park and Rec other than opening their mail and making sure the bills get paid on time. And we only put that in because of that porta potty fiasco 2 years ago. Where 5 figures of expenses that were not budgeted. So it to me in 2022, having no staff person with any responsibility to Park and Rec is not a sustainable situation. And with the changes in composition on that 3-member elected commission, they made it very clear they expect some level of staff support. I don't think that's unreasonable given the operational function they place, but it is, as of today, nobody's job. That makes it my job. And I've put in more time on Park and Rec in the last 6 months than any other single issue in this entire town. And that is no exaggeration. The summer rec program.
I think I can verify.
Yeah, Rick's seen them.
I've come in Angus' office, seen the hair on the floor.
It's so anyway, I don't want, but the point, that's one of the staffing needs, and it is an active discussion with affected employees. That's why it can't be that definitive because it's still an active discussion.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, we've got a motion, we've got a second. All those in favor? 1. All those opposed? 4. Let's to article, DPW article.
Page school exterior was next, and
What about the pickup?
that was much, so if we go in order of the packet, page 63, 53 was the facility improvement.
Okay,
Page 63 was the page school exterior evaluation article.
okay.
Can I go on a procedural issue question?
Sure.
So in this article that you just addressed goes to town meeting, number 7,
He did not approve.
so we're gonna do each of the 7 items.
I think the way we would write it is we would show that this is what's fun, this is what the request is. This is the breakdown of the article. This is no longer in it, like the parts, like the table, et cetera, all that stuff. And then we would basically show that we recommend basically an amendment and only approval of this much money for that article. It would be a complicated one to write, and I'm sure I'm gonna be the one that writes it.
Yeah,
Well, I was gonna say, Chris, you can take that on. I'm not handing out,
Too confused.
I think there's a pretty good chance that, I'll work with the board to rejigger how it's presented, maybe break a couple of these out as separate articles, just because we don't want confusion.
That's okay.
As long as it's allowed, I think it's a good idea to do it.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nathan, we'll put that on your list.
Thanks.
You got it, buddy.
Next is the page school brick interior. This has been floating around for a while. Gary had gotten a quote on this a couple of years ago. Actually 5 years ago now.
But just to make sure, before we go to the next thing, we voted, I just want to make sure for the minutes again, for Article 1 or Section 1, 2, 3,
And 4.
and 4.
All unanimously,
Unanimous,
5-0.
Yep.
And then 4, and I think 5 and 6 were 4-1.
Yep.
And then 7 was 1-4.
And I have the who voted how few didn't get it.
Beautiful, thank you. Yeah, I think I have it, but yeah, great, thank you.
So this is listed as number 24, with the backup beginning on page 63 of your packet.
Make a motion to approve Page School exterior evaluation article.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
I'll ask a general Page School question, because Page School needs a lot of work. We know
Yes.
that. How far down the road do we go with Page School?
That is a great big picture question.
That's a
Well,
conversation
it's all-
we've had some problems with because we've had an enormous amount of money spent on the Page School in the 4.5 years I've done this. And when I've mentioned the fact that we're gonna have a playground whose life expectancy probably exceeds the building it's next to.
Well, I want to rewind to, I think it was 99, we did the comprehensive plan. There was a recommendation at that point that the selectmen pursue another parcel of property in town, which is starting to get carved up, which was Tom Cook's, and put an elementary school there. This was a long-term vision. And take the Page School, decommission it, and put it out for proposals for senior housing. Well, that never happened.
Well, they also
So
did a major renovation.
Well, that's what happened.
And, you know, so
20 years down the road, they spent $13 million on a renovation. So we've got this money pit, and I just wonder how many of these articles we're gonna be seeing and how big these numbers are gonna
many,
grow.
many of them.
So I sat on
Bigger.
the CIC for 2 years, and I went to a meeting with Principal Gray, with Wayne, and we did a tour of the building and went through the whole capital, the capital plan, and we had the discussion that you're asking about. And that's why CIC has been pushing towards getting this article on. It was something that almost came on. I think we thought about doing it last year. It's not this article, it's the one that we find on page 65. But that it needs to be done because we need to find out, do we keep repairing this building? Do we move on?
Oh, we do.
And that study,
That's what I'm getting at.
that
Fire alarms, we do mold, we do, you know,
Right.
we've done water damage, we've done.
I think we're way too far down.
we
the wrong road.
can't really have that discussion until the article on page 65 is passed by town meeting. We get the results, and then there's a big picture decision.
But I'm hoping that brings the discussion to the forefront.
I
agree.
because We're sitting in the background way too long.
What's the name of Big Bertha in the basement? And how much does she cost that we needs to be replaced? And
Furnace.
$1,000 furnace or whatever. that-
what was it?
It's a couple $100,000.
I felt like it was in the million. I think it was close to a million.
Those two of them.
Yeah. This big tickets. So.
You've identified $5 million worth of potential improvements.
I think that's what I call it.
Oh, it's well beyond that. And there's a lot of issues with the school that include just day-to-day running of the school because of how expensive it is to heat it.
Right.
From how tall the ceilings are, but also how loose the windows are, that heat is pouring out of that building on a daily basis. There's leaks all over the place. There's significant issues with the building. There's also a lot of sentiment, and we also have this current school project going on. But yes, someday Page School will need to be replaced.
And then not so distant.
Well, you say, I was on school committee, I think it was 8 years ago, I signed the statement of interest with the state to get the funding on it. That's how long a project, even in a favorable environment, takes to go. So all I'm saying is I think as we start looking at these articles with exploration on what is wrong with the school, the discussion has got to start readjusting.
I couldn't agree more.
Agreed, yeah.
So I just hope that becomes a part of the discussion at town meeting, and I hope.
Whatever it's worth, I hear this increasingly from other people, so.
I mean, when we toured that building 2 years ago, right? We walked into a room up on the third floor, I think it was, Principal Gray brought us to. It was an unoccupied classroom that had leaks and significant issues. That's my daughter's second grade classroom this year. She's in that room. So I know what it's like in that building. It's rough.
Well, I went to school there 40 years ago and there were rooms that were like furnaces and there were rooms that were freezing 40 years ago.
Yeah, and this is after we did a $13 million renovation a few years ago.
Right, but in that renovation though, as we discussed at that meeting a couple years ago, put a Band-Aid on the problems. So it sounds like crazy to say a $13 million Band-Aid, it didn't finish the job, and
Oh, I know.
Principal Gray said to us that day, I could show you things that went way beyond the 200-page study that we got that had come up since then, and it's continued to grow and grow.
The
And
average
that's why we need
understand
this next article. So we're
That's
gonna get there.
When we feel the full effect of the current school project. I mean, so, you need to have some understanding that not everybody just has a bottomless pit of,
Well, that's
ability
what I'm
to
saying.
feed the
Even if you
tax.
started today, you're already 10 years down the road. I'm just saying, the thought process has to start.
We've had this conversation and it's not always received positively. We feel
That's
like
okay.
you do.
Yeah.
Okay,
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
congratulations. All right, so we've had a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I have a naive question, and I'm safe to admit this. So I understand that we had this estimate of $260,000 in repairs from 5 years ago, and I just common sense, things have gotten worse. I'm sure of it. But so obviously the job is going to be bigger, whatever the scope. Let's imagine there were 100 hours of work. I don't know what there really was, but it's going to be more. Could we go back to Olson LLC and ask them, hey, you did this estimate for us they gave this, I saw the letter, it's just a letter, but it doesn't show us this is the amount of work times this many dollars per whatever. Couldn't we just say, to get a baseline here, hey, we'd like to get a current market value of the work that you told us about, because whatever the hours that they said they were going to do, they multiplied those hours times some amount of money that they said this much per hour. And I don't know the breakdown of that. Obviously, it's bigger than that. The current costs are bigger, that multiplier, but also the amount of work is also going to be bigger. But I feel like that would be a starting point to say, hey, could you, if you were to give me that letter today with today's market rates, what would that letter look like? So it's not asking them for a new evaluation; it's just asking them what their current market rates are.
So
Is that
it's a great question.
is that not something that can be done because we need to get a fully new estimate, or is that something that you can ever go back to someone who gives you an estimate and say, you know what? Because look at Car Post, right? Car Post, we said this is what's going to be done. We had spent a lot of money on getting that work. Hey, it's going to happen, and then when we went to go do it a year and a half later, the market changed, and suddenly we couldn't afford to do it anymore. So, I just want to. I want to have an idea before we, 2 years later, the work is gone, is going to get done, and suddenly the market is way out of whack.
So they are not an independent contractor. They are a contractor, not an engineering firm. So they will be bidding on this quote that they gave me. So they do have an interest to whatever the estimate they give it. I wanted somebody who's neutral, who doesn't have any interest on what this costs. They looked at it, not in the engineering eye, but as a construction eye, which is fine. I understand that gives the ballpark figure. But when I looked at this is not a report. This is a survey of the existing conditions, what they see important, but it should be part of the engineer's report on what are we planning on anything else to follow soon? What have we looked at the rest of the structure itself? Are we putting a Band-Aid on only these sections, or should we look at the whole building itself? If an engineer looks at this and says, by fixing this might cause more damage to the other structure because they're adding more weight on these little areas that we're fixing, be prepared to be fixing more stuff. I'm not an expert at structural engineering. And you can see by my grades, it was not my strong point. So I don't know how valid this study is. This is a contract who does for a living, and I appreciate that. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know if I'm taking missing things. They could be missing a lot of stuff. They're not stamping this. They're not sending it out to bid. This will still go out to bid, and somebody else could bid on it. Not even this company. And if I use this as my spec and it's wrong, then this is not an engineer. This is project manager. That's for a living, which I expect. I don't know who it was to be an expert at the job, but at the end of the day, and I said, it would be easy for me just to call the back. Hey, I got a job. I'm going to be going your way. Can you drive by and give me another quote? That'd be the easiest thing to do. I don't know if we liable it. I would have liability on that. I would have preferred your way personally. I wouldn't be if we're not.
Well, the other way would be just like any homeowner there, but I know that we can't do this. Is just put it out. Hey, what are all the bids right now immediately without the report? So
I'm afraid it's undervalued, like you said.
for sure, it has to be. It has to be where construction costs got in, and we all see it's getting worse there.
Yes.
All right.
Any
Thank
other
you.
discussion? Got a motion, we've got a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of this article? Unanimously passes 5-0. Next.
Next article is the, basically,
Make a motion to, this is the structural safety and assessment study for the Page School. Make a motion to approve the structural safety and assessment study.
Second.
Is there a second, any discussion?
I think we had our discussion on this essentially already. It's
Yeah.
critical that this is done immediately so we can figure out what the right course of action for the future of the Page School is.
How was the number determined? Just curious.
We took what we did last time, what we paid last time on the study, and I put a 30% mark or whatever on it. And I think we're gonna wanna ask for more information. The report, I looked at the report the best I can, 280.
Yeah, it's big.
It's a lot of reading to do. I think we'd ask for more, and I think we want some backing on usage, on where we're going in the future. It was very focused on structural, which is what we need. Structural, like, do we want to ask the contractor, what's the future needs of the building, what's the number of kids we need? So I think we wanna, the scope really has to be fine tuned, but a lot of people need to put their 2 cents in, because it should not be just written by an engineer personally. This is a big question we're asking. We need finance people asking this question, engineers, economic, we need to figure out the economics of this. So I put it out because I wanted to make sure if somebody, are we looking at this, that we could add it to the scope. I didn't want to say the scope's limited on just looking at the bricks.
Any other discussion?
Is it going to bid, or is it the previous contractor looking at it again?
I'm sorry.
Does it go out to bid, or is it the previous?
We would probably do an RFP or RFQ at least, request for qualifications, request for proposals. I don't think we would just hire somebody that we felt, I don't know, it depends, we have to talk internally about it.
there would definitely be a procurement process.
Yeah.
As you probably know, with the RFQ, you're not bound by the low bidder. You select based on qualifications and then negotiate a fee, which can be advantageous depending on the kind of work, so that you're not locked in with a low bid, but there would definitely be a procurement process.
We don't have to, we could hire a designer, but I think in this case, we want to find the best and have public input.
Yeah.
So I think we would try to go that route.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. So Wayne, is this, from the narrative there in the first paragraph in the article request, is this soup to nuts? I mean, is this looking at everything, the HVAC?
I hope so. I mean, that's the goal. That's, I mean, as much as people give us information what we're looking for, yeah, that's why I upped it, because I wasn't sure what we're asking for.
Yeah.
I think the last one was $48,000, whatever it was. And I'm like, well, there's so many other questions I have that I didn't see in the report that I'm just thinking of, not even, understand the whole school system.
Yeah.
Everybody else can have their own school system. Obviously, the HVAC system, brick, exterior, that's gonna be already.
The windows that Nathan was talking about, the mold.
It's a lot.
Wayne, what about the water lines and the quote that we got from Fitzmyer and Tachi, just to look at that one item?
Yeah, because that would,
Because that alone, we've been in discussions with Pentucket and, we were looking at a potential grant to swap out the drinking water facilities.
because of those changing rules, right?
Right, but we don't want to do that if we think the issue is within the pipes, within the walls, and
Right.
sometimes.
We can add that, we probably get a better buy if we actually.
Because that part of the work, I believe, very confident would be ARPA eligible. But that alone, was that 26 or 46,000?
Oh, it was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money just to look at the water lines.
I don't think it was up to 50,000, but I think it was like 30s, 40s. But definitely.
No, and Greg said that was a big issue at our meeting, and that was gonna even get harder because it was eventually we're talking about the lead part, the lead's part per whatever million, however it's measured, that there's an acceptable amount of lead in the pipe, which is horrible to say, but that eventually the law is going to be changing to a true zero. Not a 1 out of a billion, a true zero, and that's where things are going, and that's going to cause significant problems for that building to be viable in the long run.
This isn't helping Chris, because, you're right, but we have these lead
Right, I remember.
joints that are in the concrete wall, behind the concrete wall. We don't know that until somebody breaks open the wall and checks and sees what it is. I said, kick him, you love this. When we talk about put money into a building, it's like, you need to figure out if we fix it for $100,000, it costs $800,000.
You almost have to disassemble it for a time and figure out what's wrong.
You're taking the school down. I mean, you're right. Yeah, I know.
Anybody else have anything? they'd like to-
So the fee proposal, this was just in January, if it's my, just on the water piece, was about $44,000. That included engineering drawings of what fixes need to be made, because they got us an initial proposal and they were just basically evaluating it, but not telling us how to fix it. And I sent them back to the drawing board, because I said, that doesn't help us. We need to know what is the fix. And then they gave us an updated proposal that was about 44,000. We didn't go forward at that time. We may in the future, but I was skeptical because they sent the exact same proposal with the exact same dollar amount to each of my counterparts in Merrimack and Groveland. And to me, that suggested like it's the same. These are very different buildings. So, but the point is, just the water issue, to get our head around that is you're at a mid-40s.
Okay, we've had a motion, we've had a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of this article was presented. Chris, you're gonna do the narrative on this one.
Boy.
Express passion on the subject.
You wouldn't want to read the narrative. We're looking at $150,000 to tell you got a building as a money pit. That's what it's going to come down to.
You're right.
You articulate it any way you see fit. What's next?
Let's see, next one.
You have a fire next to your chair fire, I suppose.
Town hall phones.
Town hall phones.
Oh,
Page 67. Make a motion to approve the town office phone system article.
Is there a second? Discussion,
I have a question.
go.
Did you look at leasing versus buying?
we haven't thought about it yet. We haven't thought about it yet. I have a bunch of proposals and specs I was looking at. I think we're gonna do an RFQ and make people come in and tell us what the best offer is. That's the last one I looked at was they said, what do you think we need? And make them to do the selling point to the committee. There is some negative part about leasing, because you're gonna pay it over a long amount of time, but you do get new equipment. Are we gonna house it with a server in the building here, or we're gonna do on the cloud? I can't answer those questions, I know nothing about phones, all I know, I pick it up and I make a phone call. So we're gonna need to get somebody here to talk to us about this and explain it to us, but we're open for anything. I'm gonna write the specs to say, you bring us the best product and we'll make the decision.
And my concern is this stuff becomes obsolete fairly quickly, and when you buy it 5 years from now, you're gonna want something else.
Good point.
And is leasing, if leasing is the better option, does this make sense to be part of the annual budget rather than as an article? Yeah,
Yeah.
to me, it would clearly.
There's gonna be an upfront cost, if you're gonna lease
Sure.
upfront cost. So if it's an upfront cost of $24,000, then we just talk about putting it in the operating budget the year after, then we get back the extra.
Yeah, turn back.
But we haven't made the decision yet on that. Well, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean,
Anybody else? Got a motion, we've got a second, we've had discussion, all those in favor of the article is presented. Opposed?
I'll oppose.
You're up, so it's
4-1.
4-1.
Jim, if I could, just out of curiosity, is it that you don't know what's needed, or you think it needs more thought?
I think it needs more thought. I think I kind of go with Walter's comment about, if we're gonna allocate 65,000, that kind of assumes that we're gonna buy new equipment, and I question whether that's really necessary and whether there's other better options. So that's my reason.
Okay, fair point.
Walt, I'm gonna have you write the narrative on that one.
Okay.
Next article,
Next article is the mission pickup truck for the buildings grounds.
It's the all, so make a motion to approve the all electric truck.
is there a second?
Second.
Discussion,
Why the extended range battery on a truck that will be located driving only within this town?
that's the way that Rick could talk me into getting it, so I'm anti-electric and I
It's-
wasn't ready to do it yet.
I mean,
No, in reality, it's.
I appreciate the honesty.
No, I'm gonna be honest with you.
Where's the bus? Where's the roll underneath?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna be honest with you, it's a big step for DPW to go towards an electric vehicle, with the policy and balance, with the all electric option. We don't have any.
Is that an official policy? Like official?
Well, select board policy, it becomes effective at the beginning of next fiscal year, not this coming fiscal year, but FY '24.
So it was voted with a date of effect a little ways out to give
Okay.
department heads time to transition toward it.
And we don't have many vehicles that could do electric. So this one came up, and I was like, oh, geez, well, I might not be able to come back to the electric option for another 3 or 4 years. So, all right, so I went to the guys, I talked to them about it, and they're really open about it. But of course, my guys are open, I almost fell over, because I thought, no, but they were like, yeah, this is a good truck to try it on. But they were like, we don't want to run out after 6 hours of snowstorm. And obviously, you're not gonna get a full alternate charge for a snowstorm, because the weather conditions.
Is this gonna plow?
It won't be a plow, he goes around and does all the, he's driving around. to all the
Right.
buildings.
If we have these charging stations in the parking lot, why do we need to get this new Ford Charge Station Pro? Is this incompatible with the chargers we already have?
We put it inside the garage, we put our vehicles in the garage. All our vehicles are stored in garages, we have no vehicles.
Well, you could store it there, but then you could
Yeah,
charge it
charge it
over
over
here,
here.
because we already have one.
But
That
it's
said,
charged on the
from the reports I've
It's
seen,
actually
it
one-
does not get used very much at all.
It's ramping up a little bit, but yeah, there's always openings. But there's always openings, yeah,
Yeah,
at
there's
this
no
point.
Like the truck is kept in the garage, locked up, seals, no one walks over anything in the back of the truck. So it's-
I mean, the trend is clearly going to be towards more electric vehicles, so putting a charger in at this point is really not just for this vehicle, but it will, I'd say, almost certainly be servicing other vehicles in the future.
My concern is only compatibility with other makes and models. Not necessarily, they may all charge the same.
Yeah.
And they may have gotten together and collectively said, all chargers are gonna have the same 8 plugs or whatever to do it. I don't know if that's true or not true.
Yeah,
It's not,
Yeah.
Tesla's on their own.
yeah, no, that's a valid point. The trend that I've been seeing is there's a standard level 2 charger, and I can't remember if it's a J1322, whatever the specification is for it. And everybody appears to have an adapter
Okay,
to that plug in the worst case.
and that makes sense.
The adaptive part is cheap, the actual is $2,000.
Yeah, the adapter that way is cheap. The adapter, if you wanted like a Tesla charger to go to something else, that gets different.
Right.
It's a different system, much higher voltage.
It's like the app.
The truck cost is high, it's higher than a gasoline vehicle. With the price, it's.
All right, any other discussion on this?
I'm curious to Nathan's question about the extended range. It seems 10 grand. What is the range on a regular basis and what does the extended get you? Is it worth it?
I
think it's hours.
When I looked at it, because the truck has not been released, they don't have real operating numbers. I have not found operating numbers yet because they haven't released.
I'm
the
sorry,
truck.
say again?
The miles, the comparison about the extended and the standard. They
Yeah, I
they
don't-
don't have enough tests to give you a real number on.
Well, I think there's an expected range for
It's an
the-
expected,
for
but they-
both of them. Range is always gonna be dependent upon,
Driver
driving
conditions,
characteristics and temperature and.
Well, it's probably similar challenges to what we've seen before, the police vehicles where they're gonna be idling and just running while not actually putting mileage on. All your vehicles are pretty low mileage overall,
Yeah,
but they are high use.
they are.
So, while we can still purchase a traditional vehicle, it's in theory, we could purchase 2 trucks for the cost of this one, almost, not
Not
quite.
a truck and a
Almost.
half, maybe, but.
Well, I love the idea of the
Well,
electric.
I found this model for $35,000 last night. I looked, I could go buy one tomorrow, 20 miles down the road.
So what's the policy? Is if electric's available, we take advantage of that?
Right.
Okay.
So, and just, not that we'll get into all the details now, but just so you know, where to find policies and bylaws. They're all in one place on the website. This was not the case a couple of years ago. It is now. So if you click on select board policies, but just so you know, for future reference, if you want to tool around the website, it's all.
All right, we've had a motion, we've had a second. Is there any other discussion on this before we vote your conscience? All those in favor of this article? Opposed, 4-1. Next one.
Okay. The next one is the DPW dump truck.
Make a motion to approve the DPW dump truck article, upgrading from an F-350 to an F-550.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Is it electric?
No, it's not.
The big ones aren't yet.
Again, just for reading it, it's not necessarily the truck, it's the equipment that goes on it. that
Right, it was interesting to read how
Significantly increases the cost, so just taxpayer be aware of that.
it was 40,000 for the truck and 30,000 for the dump part of it. And but interesting to read the details that you provided about how the 350 is performed and why a 1 ton truck versus a 2 ton truck, and why that 2 ton truck is necessary, so.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor of the article as presented unanimously passes. What's next?
Emerald ash borer study.
I'm done with that. Go ahead.
All right, make a motion to approve the article covering the emerald ash borer study.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
This is page 78.
I mean, okay, so my questions related to this are not related to, I'm likely to vote for this, but I just have a question of how we're ever gonna really stop this, in the sense that, are we ever going to be able to stop these bugs from flourishing and, private property and ash trees deep within the woods, and the bugs will survive there and then they'll come back, and how do we identify all, prevent the harm to the trees, or maybe we get them all out of West Newbury? Well, they're gonna be surviving in all the area towns, and then when West Newbury takes a deep breath, suddenly all the ash borers can thrive and survive in West Newbury again. I don't know, I just don't, I see, no, it is, I get that. I see the value in the study, but I also see that, I also question how we're ever gonna truly eradicate this problem. I don't think that that's unrealistic.
Well, I don't think
The more
it's
you
just-
learn, the more daunting this problem is.
That's what I'm saying, is it's significant, and I'm curious if our efforts are fruitless because we will not ultimately have a chance of success. That's what I'm concerned about.
So history has shown that they do move through. They started in
Interesting.
one part of the country, and I believe there's no more ash borer in like Oregon. They have moved through, they left, they've killed everything that nothing they eat.
Well, that's not good.
But they moved through, or they've been treated, and they move, so they won't attack a treated tree, they skip that tree because it's been treated. So once they found all the trees that they could attack, they move on and they die off, or they move on. So it's went from the west coast to the east coast, it made it here now. But it does leave. It could be 5 years, it could be 7 years. I read, Fred sent out some good documentation from the tree commission, 3 to 5 years, 6, 7 years. This thing might save some, but it's also the audit of what is dead in town,
Right.
which is important to me as a tree one, because I want.
That's my more rational question. Where is the cost for removal of the trees that cannot be saved gonna come from?
Yeah, another visit to you. Right, I mean, we have money in our budget now to do tree removal. It's been very well stocked, so we can do a management program for trees. This will be over that budget in the long run, but this will help me with priorities. I can tell you don't quote me, out of the 600 trees that need to be removed, we need to remove 110 now. The other 400, if a tree falls and nobody hears it, doesn't hit somebody's house, did it fall? So we're gonna have to decide, and this study will tell me which one's a priority, so I'll know 110 trees in the public right of way we need to grab.
But this is just on town-owned property.
That's correct.
So it's almost irrelevant because there's so much private property. I've got ash trees all over my land, so
Right.
it's not gonna eradicate them there or
It
take
won't.
care of the trees there, so it almost seems like you're throwing money at a
But
problem.
this plan isn't to get rid of, this plan isn't really to get rid of them, we're evaluating them to decide if there's something we could treat. If we could treat them, we could treat them and save the ones on the public right of way, if we decide we want to treat.
Is
I don't
there
think there's many, I don't think
Opportunity
there's
to
many.
treat them though. I thought once you had them, the infestation was over.
Once they hit the tree, it's done, but there's some trees, so we have some at Pipe State, which I started treating at the beginning, there's 21 trees that we're gonna treat again, so I saved those trees. As long as I keep treating them every year, or every other year.
We have a chemical treatment you do?
Yes, there's an injection in the roots.
Oh,
So we have a proof that they survive if we treat it. We have to decide if there's any more left in town that we can treat left, and this is it. If we don't do it this summer, I won't waste my money on it. If we're not gonna do it now, then don't bother doing it, because they'll be gone by next year.
So what would the cost of treatment be once you get the study evaluated? Because that's a whole nother level.
I don't, without the audit, I don't know. Fred and I joked about, there's like 50 trees out there left.
Well, but in terms of the per tree cost, you know that.
I know how much it would cost per tree.
Yeah,
So
so
it's just,
share that.
it was like $400 a tree or more than that, depending on where we get the whole. But there is a price per tree. We have to decide, if we want to pay $400 times 50 trees. I don't know if we're gonna find 50 trees.
Maybe
We might find
500 trees.
We might find 15 trees, we might find 20 trees. I think we're gonna mostly find dead trees and where they are. That's the majority of the study is gonna be to identify the trees that have been already,
Are we too far
anything-
behind the curve, I guess, is my
you know,
question.
we're 5 years ago.
So it just seems like we're throwing money at an issue that's over. I don't know if that's, am I mistaken?
But this is gonna tell me which ones are dead and prioritize them. Which we're not gonna do with Turkey House.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
To me, it strikes me that if we're able to preserve some number of trees, I think in general, it's mostly a lost cause. However, in general, if we're able to preserve some quantity of trees, they basically become the parent trees for the future. And I mean, if you look at the way land is logged, like say in the Northwest, they leave mother trees. They leave, when they clear an area, when they clear cut an area, they leave a select grouping of trees that populate for the next round, you know, for the next, and the best we could hope, I think, with this is that, you know, ash trees are significant ecologically here, and if we can let them jump this disease and make it's, you know, it's a crapshoot, quite honestly. At least I look at it that way, but.
Any further discussion? We've had a motion, we've had a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of this article? Opposed? 4 in favor, 1 in opposition. Next article.
Page 83, our public safety emergency communication equipment on to
So
the
now
page.
we're getting into the Mike Wires. Do we want to jump back to his operating budget?
Yeah, why don't we do operating budget or the
Yeah,
rest?
I think we're done with DPW.
All right,
Congratulations, Wayne.
thank you, Wayne.
Take like a 1 minute bite.
Nice act, Dan. Wait, can you bow the way?
How's that chair feel?
Cheers.
It's killing me.
I'll sit by my chair.
So workers' comp.
If that chair's too warm, you might want to swap it up. Mike, if that chair's too warm,
Wayne
you want to
just
swap
threw
it
that in
up.
for you.
If you prefer. I feel like Jeff used to like to stand. I don't know, I've seen him stand here before.
What page are we going to?
Back to the budget.
Yeah, back to the operating budget. Let me pull up a page. So, back to page 7. Oh, no, we're not. No. Page 9.
So Mike, you gonna double down or what are you gonna?
Good evening.
Good evening. Are you gonna Dick Birkenbush this thing or what? What's happening here?
We haven't crossed that bridge.
Okay, I mean, it's been done before.
You got a terminology for it.
High maintenance.
Yeah.
process.
Well, you never know, you know, it's always an adventure. Jim, I'm gonna give you the Emerald Ash Borer article.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so we are into the, to start with the fire budget. It's basically a level service budget with carrying a 2% cost of living and carrying a level budgeting of the non-personnel section.
What's the will of the committee?
Make a motion to approve the fire department budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Can I just ask a silly question? It's because I'm new to the committee. You've got the percentage spent the year, 195. Does that proportionately work out to the same number at the end of the year? It's just we haven't expended all those funds? And it's not just this one department.
Wait,
Wait, where are you looking?
At the total fire, line 220, spent on year to date through 225,
Correct, yeah.
195, 188.
Well, it's through 225 and sometimes bills come in after the fact, so it's.
If
I
you
didn't
look,
know if there's a lag on the whole.
well, if you look up at the top of that, it says percentage of year 65, so you always compare that to that.
Right.
So
So do we have another 35% of the year?
year to go.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so there's always some anomalies, debt service, you pay it all at once, so that's to get, and actually this one just, this hydrant protection, this is a one-time payment to the water department.
That's
that
always
comes out
like
of
July
that.
1st, right?
Yeah, we just pay that bill, so that's always paid 100% in the first month of the year. Many of the others track generally with the fiscal year, much more so with the regular staffing budgeting, take the town clerk's office, that's gonna track pretty much exactly. Fire is much more episodic because you don't know what's gonna happen.
And we're seeing delays too with some of the service that we use for our apparatus, our fire vehicles, are national companies. So we're seeing delays in when they can come service our vehicles, and that's usually a high ticket.
But at the end of the fiscal year, you're gonna be right on the money. It's just not all showing currently. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, there do tend to be, turnbacks in some departments. Fire is one of the departments where there's pretty consistently turnbacks. And the reason for that is we budget, you don't know going into the year what the need's gonna be. Interestingly, just up here, the fire administration tracks exactly with where we are year to date at 65%. But the fire alarm, the training, the wages lags a bit behind, whether because of incidents or training that happens in the second half of the year, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
A lot of our training was impacted by COVID too, so a lot of our training is in person, up close, so we had to back off a lot of that, go virtual, which is not as exciting.
Sure.
Electrical fires, your computers.
Okay, we have motion, we've had a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of the fire budget as presented unanimously passes. We've got fire articles.
We have several. I would count the AED devices as fire articles, although that's.
Yeah, let's start with the emergency communications equipment. That's the one with the Page School antenna. That's number 29.
Page 83 is that?
83. Okay, make a motion to approve the public safety emergency communications equipment movement onto the page.
There a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
What happens with this equipment on the top, not the page school? There's a fire at the page school. This equipment becomes obsolete. And how do we communicate in town?
Is there a better spot?
We have an option, and that would be to replace the existing structure, which is 110 foot. We looked into some options. It's a very costly replacement. We're utilizing a wireless provider to put up a tower and provide us with real estate on the top. Again, something that was not supported being so close to the school, which I completely understand.
And then the other thing that goes along with that is if we were to ever sell the page school, then that tower's on the top, or we going to have to move it? That would be
So we're fortunate about the placement of the equipment. It's actually, nothing is permanently attached to the roof. It's all anchored through steel plates and weighted stone. So what's nice is it's not a fixture of the school, it's just on the surface.
And I also think if that scenario came, you could retain an easement or retain rights as part of the transaction.
That's a good point.
It's also pretty far down the road.
It's true.
Yeah.
It looked like it costs $28,000 according to the project total, but yet 39,000 is being requested. What's the extra 10,000 for?
So what we're looking to do is there's a lot of things that are on the tower that have never been replaced. The cable, for instance, has never been replaced. So those are items that we are absolutely gonna have to replace. Other items that we're gonna move, we may test and find that they're completely compatible with the new location. One of the biggest factors in the timing of this is with the new school at Kentucky going online, they're gonna be doing testing within the in-building communication system that's gonna be part of that project. Our system at Page School needs to be operating at 100%, and right now it's in a moldy, damp, high humidity, low temperature, high temperature environment. So it's just, the equipment is not operating at all.
You forgot rodent infested.
True. And it was not.
And unmanned.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, we should carry a separate insurance policy for
Yes.
this building because it's, my insurance won't cover a building that doesn't have any, any people in it.
Yeah.
So it's,
Is there a requirement for how long they have to be there? I mean, just send somebody there for 15 minutes every day. Take your break.
Gotta pass a straight face test. I'm the one talking to the insurer, so I have to believe it in order to say it.
I think it's a bad location, that's a bad one.
Any further discussion on this? We had a motion, we've had a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of the article as presented unanimously passes. Next article.
Make a motion to approve purchase of 6 AED devices. Page 88.
Second, or second. Any discussion?
I think we should do this. I know there's a significant increase in survival rate. People who have stopped heart when an AED is around, and that people can easily become trained to use these things. I think that we should try to create a town education program if we're going to have more of these things around. So I'm all for this.
We have stepped up with some staff training. Dwyer has been real helpful, and
Yeah.
we ran a couple of trainings over at the town office just in the last month or two. Rick actually sat in as well. So if something happens, he's
Right. I think I read something about the city of Seattle did a big public health initiative, education initiative, where they put AEDs throughout the city and also just trained people on them. And as a result, they saw a significant increase in survival as a result. So the more people that know how to use them, the better.
Any other discussion?
Would the 6 go like in all the different town buildings, like one here, one in the fire department?
Yeah, so Wayne and I worked on really putting together a database of everything that we have, whether it's public safety or in the public buildings here, library.
Yep.
And just looking at options as to where they're most needed right now, and then, looking down the road at additional replacements.
Oh, okay, I missed that, thanks, thank you.
They're all the
We
same.
actually got the list. It's on page 89 in our packet, so we have it, I think.
4
Got it.
replacements and 2 new. 4 replacements and 2 new.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the article as presented unanimously passes 5-0.
Next up is on page 91. It's rescue airbag system. Make a motion to approve the rescue airbag system.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
What are rescue lifting airbags?
So they are.
I could have Googled it, but I'd love to hear from you.
They are heavy duty bags that square, some come round or rectangular, and they increase at a high rate of air pressure. And as you use them, you can raise up heavy equipment such as
Oh, okay.
a trailer to a
Sure.
tractor, or a tractor that tips over, or possibly an animal that tips over on somebody. They can be used for a wide variety of rescue situations. So
I can
we
see
have-
why that would be useful.
Yeah, we have them in town, and they've been quite successful. So
Awesome.
they're just
Thank you.
obsolete.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of this article as presented unanimously passes. Jim, I'm gonna give you AED article.
AED and, okay.
Chris, you're gonna do airbags.
He's applying something there.
Better than the other, yeah.
We also have one more.
Trending up. Things are getting better.
We'll help you with this.
Thank you.
On page 95. I think this is our last article for the night, and then we have to go back and finish the other budgets. Make a motion to approve the rescue tools and power tools
Is there a second?
article.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of this article as presented unanimously passes. Walt, you're gonna take this one?
I do just want to quickly note that Chief Dwyer is following the cue of the policy. If battery powered products are available.
Got that.
I'm not the only one. Great, great. Literally watching over your shoulder.
And
You know what? We actually had this discussion, I feel like a year ago, and because of chainsaws we were talking about, I think it was with DPW. I own a battery powered chainsaw that's top of the line. My uncle owns a regular average gas powered chainsaw. They don't compare to each other. They're not even close. It's like a butter knife versus a machete. So, when it comes to equipment like this that has to do with saving people's lives, if there's any sacrifice in power based on battery, choose the gas powered, please.
That's not the town policy.
But no, it is, because it's the policy, if I remember the policy, it says based on sacrifice in power. That, and if this comes down to saving people's lives, if someone's gonna get hurt because something has 75% of the capacity, then that would be a shame that someone gets hurt because of that.
All right, police budget?
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, there is, the policy does allow for, judgment to be exercised.
Good night. Thank you for your help.
We're not,
Well,
We're automatons. All right, police budget.
okay, police budget. The police budget was one of the challenges in preparing the budget, and I should say that Chief Duran prepared the budget. He was unavailable to be here tonight. But one of the challenges is we haven't finalized the terms of the new chief's contract. But as I said in the narrative, I do think with the amount that we budgeted, I think we're sufficiently covered. So I don't see the need for this number to change, but just so you know, that's still a moving forward.
What's the will of the committee?
make a motion to approve the police department budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Go ahead.
Just a question, school resource officer. I don't assume you'll still be doing that yourself.
No, unfortunately, they wanted me to, but I told them that's not the cards, so.
So does that position remain, or how does that play out at that point? Did you
Yeah,
get another officer?
It would be an officer that's probably gonna be not as highly paid on the scale that I was. Incentives that I was.
Mike's got a master's degree, so he's one of the union contractors, a number of incentives that he gets that there's nobody else in the department with that same additional incentive.
Originally,
Sorry.
the resource officer was funded partly by the town and a certain
Yeah,
percentage.
we do. Yeah, part of the Kentucky budget carries funds for an offset. It doesn't show up in the expense budget. There was, I believe there was a time they were carrying the net cost. Am I remembering that right? That was not the right way to do it. You need to carry the gross cost. Your offset from Kentucky does flow to the bottom line of the tax rate, but you don't see it. It's not something that shows up on the town meeting, but the amount they were carrying is in the order of 32 to 33,000, and that was increased, I think, by 2.5% each of the last 2 years. So it's a partial offset. It doesn't offset, the full position, and that's something that's been a subject of extensive discussion. But that is the amount that's carried in the Kentucky budget. So they write us a check for that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion? Go ahead, Jim.
I had a few observations or questions. One of them was, I know that in the original budget, as it was, I guess, presented, there was a $25,000 amount in there for police reform, and then it was removed. What actually is that, and can you kind of elaborate a little bit on what that is?
Why don't I start with that, since you weren't as much part of the budget process last year, but then you can supplement us if what's actually going on. Yeah, the issue there was there's a new police reform law that has created significant new requirements for reserve officers to pass the academy, which is a rigorous process. There's not openings, it's where is it within the Commonwealth in terms of where the trainings are offered. And it also makes it much more difficult for small departments like ours that rely on a mix of career officers and reserve officers, because people can no longer, in order to be a reserve officer, to get that training, that's a significant investment of time and resources, not just on the part of the individual, but also on the part of the town. Mike, what's the length of the training?
So, and actually, right now, there's a lot of things that aren't as concrete yet in the whole process, but the training right now has gone beyond the original part-time reserve officer training, which was about 6 months, 8 months, nights and weekends, has now turned into a lot of online training, a lot of in-person training, and a lot of specific qualifications now that are needed for officers, which has gone, way beyond where it was originally. When, for instance, I was going through the Reserve Academy, but a lot of those pieces are still not in place.
Some of them have changed, some of the requirements have been increased, decreased. So we're seeing a lot of fluctuations right now with what's gonna be required and what we're gonna feel for an impact.
Right, so in kind of in summary form, the law, as I recall, was signed into law right around the first of the year in late calendar year 2020.
Federal law.
No, state law.
Okay.
Governor Baker signed into law. So it was signed into law, basically right at the beginning of the budget season last year. There were a lot of questions. There still are a lot of questions. So going into the budget for FY22, we had carried, initially what we thought was going to be the budget. And then as there was more and more information about police reform, what was known, what was not known, the select board during the budget process last year said, we think we ought to carry some amount, knowing that this is going to impact us, not knowing how. So it was broken out as a separate line really for transparency. Part of why you see in terms of the year to date, you see the OT overspent, but the salaries and wages relatively underspent relative to budget is some of the need, like right now, how many officers we have in the academy right now? Is it 3 or 2?
We have 1 in and then we have 2 going.
2 going in. So those are shifts that they can't cover. That sometimes drives the need for overtime. So it's very difficult budgeting between the base salaries and wages and the overtime, because it depends, partly if the shift is covered by a part-time reserve officer or a full-time officer who's now under the overtime rate. With fewer and fewer reserve officers, that's driven, more of the shifts are covered by, career officers who are at an overtime rate, so.
Yeah. And so that in fiscal year 22 or 21, it was in there kind of as a placeholder, more or less, 25,000.
In 22, it was
22.
not, in the current fiscal year,
Yeah.
so.
Any other questions about this? Go ahead.
Well, I saw that. I just want to point out for anyone that's listening to this after the fact and seeing the budget, when they see that 110%, that number is okay because of that increased training and what Angus alluded to of the underspent police and salaries, that's 7% behind pace based back in February. So that's a good thing. In that 100% overspent is way less than what that 7% would be anyway. So that's a good thing. But my real question is, if we look forward to the electric with cars, I saw an article in the newspaper probably a month or 2 ago about Topsfield. They did purchase a Tesla as their first electric police vehicle. I'm curious because we hear about all the different increased costs of cars when that purchase process. I know we're on an annual basis of buying a new car. When we're planning on buying a new car, whether or not $40,000 is enough for the typical SUV that we've been purchasing for the last several years, or are we at a point where we're going to start looking at an electric vehicle this year? And if so, is this enough money?
The answer is yes and yes. We are purchasing. We in fact have signed an agreement to buy a hybrid vehicle. We got a Green Communities grant that modestly offset the cost at $5,000. We had a high degree of confidence coming into the fiscal year we would get that grant. We were, thanks to Rick and a lot of work he did. So that offsets the gross cost. We also we get funds that come into an account with police details that goes into a separate account. So that fills the gap between so the 40 budgeted plus 5 grant funds, plus if there's an overage that we pay that from the. And Rick, do you recall what the cost was? I just signed, or Chief Director just signed it last week. The new one.
It's right around $50,000. I don't remember exactly. But it's right around.
Yeah.
So that's there's a little bit of a premium for the hybrid, but then there's a $5,000 Green Communities grant that offsets it. So I think it actually probably came out to be a wash, or maybe even marginally less expensive than if we bought a internal combustion engine.
Fair to say, you got the extended range option on this one?
Well, no, this is
It's not saying it's a hybrid.
It's a hybrid.
Yeah, this is a hybrid. So the advantage of the hybrid is that
The truck is full electric.
So the advantage of the hybrid for a police vehicle, which tend to have a lot of idle time, is that with a hybrid, when you're sitting and not moving, the engine is gonna shut off, and it's gonna run off the hybrid battery until it calls the engine on, because the hybrid battery is depleted enough. So the idle time, the engine idle time will go down substantially, which should mean that the vehicle lasts longer, because, one of the long-term, claims, maybe claim isn't the right word, but fact is that, a lot of the wear on the police vehicles is while they're sitting, the engine is idling, and they're not going anywhere.
No, you're right, and Chief Duran has come before us and told us that before, as Chief Reed told us that many years ago too, about how that idle time, there's a separate clock for that, and that adds up and contributes to it, so.
And I pulled up the quote, it's just from last week, it's $50,082, so
Okay.
just basically 50
Good.
grand even.
That's good.
Are there any other questions or discussions you'd like to have on this project?
Plus, we can reduce that fuel cost of 24,000 eventually. when it's-
Right. Yeah, you're gonna get.
That's the idea.
At least 50% better fuel mileage.
All right, we've had a motion, we've had a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor of this budget is presented 5-0, it passes. Thank you.
Next up, municipal dispatch.
Public safety dispatch.
It's basically a level service budget.
Make a motion to approve the municipal dispatch budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
What are we looking at now?
It's
Public
page
safety
17.
dispatch.
Public safety dispatch, 300,000 a year. I want to discuss that.
Okay, we've had a second. Go ahead.
I want to hand something out. I got an electronic copy of the call logs for the last 3 fiscal years. And what they show is that we get less than 1 call per hour. Emergency Management Center. And there are long periods of time where there are no calls. So the spreadsheet
What's
shows.
your question?
Okay. That's why we need to rewind the room.
Yes, we do. Yes, that's all. Yeah.
The spreadsheet shows the numbers for the last 3 fiscal years. And they amount to about 0.8 or 0.85 calls per hour. And if you look at the back of that, there's a sample sheet. 1 page out of the call log for last June. And it shows, for example, there was a 13.5-hour period where there was absolutely no activity for the call center. The only thing that happened, one policeman signed out of his car and went into the center for an hour or so, but nothing else happened for that 13.5-hour period. So my contention is that West Newbury is too small to support its own emergency call center. And what I think we should think about doing is proposing to the other 2 towns in Pentucket that maybe we combine everything into 1 center. We could add quite a bit to the cost. We're spending about $300,000 a year now. We could probably go up to $500,000 or $600,000. Our share would only be about 30%, which means we'd get down to maybe $150,000, which would cut our costs in half. So I'd like to have some discussion on this. Is this worth pursuing?
Well, I don't know that it's our place to make those types of policy decisions, Walt. I mean, I don't disagree with your data or your assertion, but, certainly we've had numerous discussions about combining resources and sort of, that's been an ongoing point, but this body doesn't make those types of policy choices. We just simply review the budget.
I would share some knowledge from 4 or 5 years ago. Chief Reed sat before us, and we had that discussion with him, and he talked about the importance of keeping things local. He personally had expressed concerns about regionalizing, whether it was the entire police forces or whether it was just the dispatch center, that the towns, Merrimack, West Newbury, and Groveland, are all uniquely different. That he had concerns about the dispatchers relaying in not being as knowledgeable about the other towns. He had, and I am not articulating them as well as he did from my memory from 4 years ago, but he just had concerns about that issue, about overlap there.
Well, where I come from down in Maryland, this is usually done on a county basis.
Oh, I know, and there are places that do county, and I know from from people that I'm familiar with that have worked in Amesbury, that they are not happy with the county service at all, that it's a really challenged system that is very frustrating to work through and with. So I don't think I don't think anyone locally would want to participate in that program, from what I've heard anyway.
I think one of the challenges that we would face is moving back to the article about communications. There's a lot of radio communications that need to work within a regional setup, such as the example you gave, Rockingham County, New Hampshire, same thing. We, on the West Newbury side, would have a lot to invest in that in order to have really good coverage throughout the town, because we're full of hills. And we struggle with that as it is on a good day with our communication. So that was one of the topics that came up with regionalizing as far as this area would be concerned. It's the costs associated with getting it up to that 100%.
That would be a one-time cost. And look at
ongoing maintenance.
what you save every year.
Exactly.
So, I think it was 20 years ago or so, we did regional dispatch with Groveland.
That's right.
West Newbury paid a nominal amount, I think it was 40 or 50,000 a year. And the town decided to bring dispatch into the town. I don't recall the reasoning, but it was efficiencies. And my concern is if we did regional, Merrimack, you're separated by a river and a bridge. You have limited issues there. So I'm not sure there's a validity to that.
No, we don't make these decisions. I mean, certainly regionalization is something we've talked about on.
It's just part of the discussion. I'm not saying,
Right.
I'm not making a motion to regionalize at all.
Right.
So my question sort of toward Walt's point, while we have you here, I don't assume that if there's a 5-hour period, the dispatcher puts a pillow on the table and goes to sleep. There's probably other work that the dispatcher is doing.
It's busy, and as somebody who worked here for just about my whole life, we have a lot of local knowledge that has, in fact, saved lives, which is priceless, if you ask me. And we, on the fire side, there's a lot that the dispatchers are responsible for right now, that we do not have staffing at the fire station for that type of administrative work. So, I mean, it's a great discussion. I love discussing regionalization.
Now, there was also, what is it, Essex County Regional Dispatch?
Yeah.
And that seemed to be quite problematic. I think West Newbury voted not to join that years ago.
And there was a study committee back in 2010 that looked at that extensively. There have been some changes there. I've been to a couple of information sessions there. Rick joined me for one of those. It is something the select board in my office are looking at. It's not something we've taken any formal steps toward, but it is something that we have looked at and are continuing to look at.
Walter's got a point as far as the money goes. And again, way out of the purview of this board and committee, but as a voter at town meeting, you would have that opportunity to speak to it. So I think the response is you're looking into it and there's a potential in the future.
There is, they've kind of charted out a course that you can initiate a process with them where they come in and over the course of about 18 to 24 months, evaluate the system, make a proposal. So that is a step that the board has talked about, but again, it's not formally taken. I believe that would be something that would need to be bargained. So it's, with the union, so it's not something we can just, initiate without a ripple effect.
And there are a lot of factors to consider. Part of them is local public service, how do people feel locally, ultimately comes down to whether or not we're going to adopt that. And
I think that we need to educate the public. I mean, I had no idea that the workload was this light. I mean, less than one call an hour, and sometimes 13 hours with nothing to do. Is that really worth spending $300,000 a year on? Which is what we're doing.
If that one call is to save your butt, it is. Well, that's what I'm saying. You only need them when you need them. When you don't need them,
Right.
it becomes irrelevant. So,
But even today, the police departments from the other two jurisdictions come over to help us. How do we communicate with them?
They come in, they use our frequency, so our radio, so they turn all their equipment over to West Newbury.
So they have equipment that would be compatible with ours. Some money would have to be spent. But we could save a heck of a lot of money every year.
Yeah, I think the question, and it is a real question, it's not a question I have the answer to, or anyone does, but I think the question is, could we save the money while maintaining or exceeding the current level of service? That's the question that.
And I think the school budget is gonna put so much pressure on the three towns.
I
that we
agree
need
with
to look
that.
for opportunities to save money.
I
This is-
agree,
this is one of them.
I totally agree with that.
Okay. I've said my piece.
Any other discussion on this matter? Got a motion, we've had a second, we've had discussion, had handouts. What's the will of the committee? All those in favor of this budget line item is presented? Opposed?
I abstain.
You can oppose it.
You
So
can oppose.
We always take a position that vote your conscience.
Okay, 4 in favor, 1 opposed. That's fine. Vote
Don't ever be afraid to vote.
your conscience. Abstain if you have a conflict.
Yeah, that's when, yeah.
If you have a conflict, you abstain. If not, you vote. Okay, what's next?
Next, animal control, this contractual amount, you recall, we entered a 3-year agreement that goes through the end of the next fiscal year.
The 2 1-year options, right? I read.
Yep.
What's the will of the committee?
Make a motion to approve the animal control budget.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of this budget? Well, they see.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5-0. We're all set. What's next?
Last one.
Next is
Emergency management.
emergency management, and Leanne Delp had been planning to be here tonight, but something came up, so she couldn't. So she said, Dwyer's happy to cover it. But it's a level service budget with a 2% cost of living. This is, I will say, this is not the total cost. Some of the costs of this come from a grant, actually a couple of different grants we get from Seabrook. So this is the net cost.
Make a motion to approve the emergency management budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, go. Did you have to say?
You said that's not the total cost. What is the total cost less the grants?
I think it's geez, I'd have to run my history on that. It's in multiple accounts, so I don't have it on the tip of my tongue.
But is it similar to the amount in the budget, or is it double, triple?
I think the amount of the grants is about 15 grand a year.
Okay,
Some for personnel, some for equipment.
thank you.
Any other questions?
But I'll follow. I want you to have the right number, so I will follow up. I think that's about right.
No, it's just a curiosity. Not,
Yeah.
not seeing. Just
Yeah.
Seabrook Station maintains the generator that services public safety complex.
All those in favor of this budget line item? 5-0. I think that's it.
Agenda item number 6, review scheduled topics for future meetings. Number 7, communications. Number 8,
Angus,
adjournment.
I think that's it for the detail. You have anything you want to talk about for, thank you, Chief
No.
Dwyer?
No, just we put together normally we do a schedule like you see up on the screen here at the beginning. I didn't get that till Friday night. But just this kind of charts out what's ahead for the next 2 meetings. I did talk to Gary earlier today. There's some heavy topics in here, and I told him if he or the committee gets to a point with any one of these you're not comfortable or you feel like you need more information, if you go to a 5th meeting into April, I'm totally in favor of that. If we got some packed agendas, so I would say when I send out the packet, which I'll do before the weekend. For each of these next 2 meetings, if you have questions over the weekend or Monday, especially things where, we might not have the data right at hand, send them ahead of time. It helps me and my staff prepare.
Are we doing car post on the 29th?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's a select board sponsored 3 articles.
Okay, great.
That'd be an easy one.
Yeah,
The
there's some
gift
heavy
that
stuff.
keeps giving, the car post.
Before you adjourn, I'll have a couple of questions. I don't know where they'll slide in.
We have, we have any communications, and then I'll go right to you. We can,
No communications.
Okay, by all means, go ahead.
So you're talking about writing the rationale for the warrant articles.
Yes.
Requirements, what are you looking for?
Okay, well, I mean,
4 or 5 pages?
what I know,
No.
I mean, what I
It's
did when
usually
we got
better.
started is you look at the old finance committee booklets and they have narratives there, and you can kind of use that as your guide. And you don't need to really feel any pressure, just kind of put out, a blurb explaining our position on it, and we.
Sometimes the blurb is a sentence or two, sometimes it's a paragraph,
Yeah.
depending on how complex the article is.
It's
But
not-
is it supposed to reflect the view of the committee or
Yes.
editorial based on the fact that I'm irritated with Paige, you know?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's supposed to
It can be-
reflect the vote, you can,
It can be a mixture of both,
Well, state what the vote was and then
right,
and you say the justification for the
do we
vote.
run it by the committee?
we will. So
Okay.
I'll be putting together the packet, and I'll collect everyone's stuff, I'll put it in, and then y'all will edit it and we'll edit it together.
Red pen, 5 points off, the spell.
Yeah,
It'll all be digital though, so.
That's generally
yeah.
the question.
Yeah, I mean,
There's a
actually.
lot of bibliography with that too.
Cite your sources,
Go ahead.
references.
So even if there's not a fifth meeting on substance on what you see up here, I think, some kind of meeting in early April to talk about the workflow for the booklet. Because typically, Nathan in my office will work real closely on that. When everyone's got a role and where we have a couple of new members, it might not be a bad idea.
Well, one thing that I think has been great that you've done tonight, Gary, is telling people ahead of time if they want to get started writing on things, they can do that. I think that's a great change. So, if you have stuff ready to go, you can send me your blurbs whenever, and I'll start putting them into a document.
Usually I wait till like 2 or 3 days before, and I'll send
2
you
or
an
3
email
minutes
and
before,
say,
minutes
Chris, do like.
We usually do it at the last meeting.
23, 24.
I'll say that was in my trash, I couldn't find it.
We usually do it like the last meeting, and then it's a lot to pull together at the end.
Okay. I'll try and
But
get
we
that.
have about a month in between our last meeting and the.
That's
things,
right, yeah, with the May 14th town meeting, the drop dead date is 14 days prior, which is, I think it's the last Friday in April.
So March 29th, when we meet on that date, I will give you guys a date that I need everything by to really start putting it together, so we can have sufficient time to edit.
And here's
April
the,
29th.
yeah, so you hear and the second and third page of your packet was the overall schedule, so this, the deadline for the FinCom booklet, or really it's the warrants, it's
Right.
14 days
But
prior.
we're gonna get that there. I know
Yeah.
things didn't happen that way in the fall, and there's lots of reasons for that,
So we
but
send it to Nathan.
This April will be
if he
fine.
wants it.
I think if we set a date of like April 10th or April 15th, that's when I will likely give you a date. I'll look at the calendar.
And you
when we
can
send.
trade if I'm
I'm
not
not
here,
trading anything.
it's like lunch, you can.
April 10th,
Yeah.
Bunch of
electronic
carrots,
to you.
give you carrots to Chris.
Other question.
Yeah.
I saw a future meeting planning boards coming up. This committee generally looks at financial components. But a lot of those issues, having been a planning board person, are very deep and thoughtful on zoning regulation changes.
But we
don't touch it.
do that.
You know,
However.
We have it for about 3 years.
I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because there is, I think you might want to look at this wetlands bylaw.
Well,
The last couple of years, and it was actually on my advice that.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. I advised the finance committee a couple of years ago, because they were reviewing every article. And as you know, these go through planning board hearings, they go through select board. And so basically they said if it didn't have a financial implication, it wasn't going to be reviewed. And
I think they use the
that's-
term metastasize.
Well, and
Yeah, it was kind of.
but they all do have a certain financial implication in some.
Some do,
fashion.
some, I don't know if they all do, some certainly do. The wetlands bylaw, I think, in my opinion, has very clear implications for staffing needs and staffing levels. So it is something, Gary, you and I could talk offline in terms of whether you want to include it or not, but
I'll take a look at it.
it's,
And again, the history that before, they spend months getting to how they're writing these.
well, and that gets to my point, Angus. In the past, we've opened the opportunity to the other committees that are proposing things like a planning board to write a rationale. If you would extend that invitation to them, that they can get into the booklet and provide a rationale, we'd be happy to include it.
that's great, yeah, and so for instance, like the Affordable Housing Trust bylaw, which has been a great process these last couple of months. Leah's working with, the committee and myself, and she's already put together like an annotated, not just the proposed bylaw, but the annotated, so that, that's gonna go as an appendix to the FinCom booklet.
Okay.
So that one's I think it'll be in great shape.
Awesome. Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? You're adjourned. Well, no, you must stay.
8:19.
He was waiting for discussion.
Yeah.
There's
There'll be no
some food for thought.
Just